Welcome to the podcast, Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans. I am so honored to have our guest, Wallace Thompson, for the interview. Wallace Thompson is a writer and a lifelong lover of games who believes there is more wisdom on a playground than we often realize. Having spent his formative teen years outside the traditional school system and much of that time working with young children, Wallace gained a unique lens on how kids think, how they solve problems, and what adults can relearn from them. He came of age during the COVID years, turning 14 in March of 2020, navigating both isolation and unexpected independence during a time of global disruption. Those experiences shaped his understanding of resilience, connection, and growth. In his book, The Field Game Field Guide, Wallace explores how the unwritten rules of recess, fairness, adaptability, creativity, and play can make us better partners, friends, employees, and parents. His work invites us to take games seriously because they just might teach us how to live better. You're listening to Today's Leaders, from Teens to Titans. Hi, I'm Lorraine Connell, a teen leadership coach. I transitioned from teaching chemistry to coaching teens in leadership, helping them realize they can do hard things. We've often believed that leadership is an innate trait, but it's actually a skill that you build and improve. On this show, you'll meet today's leaders who share their teenage experiences, revealing how they developed confidence, direction, and the tools to become the leaders they are now. You'll discover how you or the teens in your life have the potential to become confident leaders, even if it doesn't seem possible. Wallace, I am so excited for this conversation. I'm really looking forward to what you have to share in terms of insights, and I love bringing young people on the podcast, so welcome.
Thanks, Lorraine. Thanks for having me. Thrilled to be here.
Absolutely. So this book that I have gotten and I love is so awesome. It is mostly games and how to play them, but it's the lessons that we learn. So tell me, how did you come to the idea of writing about games?
Well, and I think I mentioned this in the book, but at first I just had this thought. I think I was 12, 11, and I was playing a game of Capture the Flag with some friends of mine, and we had to decide whether or not we were playing with jails, whether or not we were playing with free walkbacks, all this stuff. And we did those decisions super quickly. It took us, 30 seconds because we had short phrases already set up. Are we doing free walkbacks? No. Are we doing jails? Yes. This knowledge, we already had it, so we could have this discussion really quickly. And as I was walking back to my side, getting ready to play the game, I thought, someone better write this stuff down, because none of this is written down. We're not going to remember all this all the time. And so at first it was just an actual handbook, just a manual. It's like, I'd like somebody to write this down because this is an important part of my childhood. I'd like it to be preserved. And then while I was chewing on that idea, I started working with kids, and I realized, okay, actually, these games I've been playing my whole childhood are super important to becoming the type of person you'd like to grow into. So then I had sort of two ideas. One was a book about play, and the other was a book that was just a manual. And I was like, well, let's just do them at the same time. And I started writing this book, and it came out pretty well, I think.
Yeah, it's great. It's really so fantastic, because what I like is that the front end of the book is about all of these life lessons that we need to be good humans, and at the end are how you can learn those life lessons through these games. It's really, really cool. And I remember when I was reading it, it was like, there are rules and then there are rules, right? So in order to frame the game, you have to have the structure, but then there are these opportunities to flex the rules and learn through that. And so often we grow up and we don't realize the connection from how we played games in our lives.
Yeah, I mean, that flexing of the rules, that's a big reason why kids need these emergent games. Kids need games that the adults are organizing. And that's one of the reasons why, is that adults can grow to be quite inflexible with the rules. Adults know how baseball is played. We're going to play baseball the proper way. And on the one hand, that's great because you don't want to make the game easier for children. Children hate that, generally speaking. But on the other hand, adults, they just grow out of this nuance that comes from relying a little more heavily on the honor system or flexing the rules because it'll be fun this one time. We forget how to do that if we don't practice constantly.
Yeah, and I think in the world of kids, we adults have created this rigidity in success versus mistakes as actually failures, right? So what I have found in my work is that kids are so afraid to make a mistake, especially in the academic world. And so games reduce that anxiety, reduce that fear. And when we make mistakes in a game, it's like a life lesson. It's a learning opportunity, but we very rarely accentuate and acknowledge that. And this instruction manual, this book really allows maybe an adult to rethink what the purpose of a game really is. So who is this book written for? Like, I'm curious, like, if you could say the ideal person to read this book is, what would you come up with?
I think it would be people who work with kids or are raising them, parents, teachers. When I was writing the book, I wanted it to be an interesting resource for people who just loved games, maybe even children themselves, older children who would be willing to read a book like that. And it's totally a good resource for them too. But if I'm being honest, the thing it's going to be most helpful for is the people who are interfacing with children all the time and could do with a reminder of exactly what the kids are doing out there.
How do you use it? Have you found that the book has been useful for you?
Yeah, so the place I used to work, and I don't work there anymore, but one of my mentors, a lady by the name of Jen Cassoni, she's actually a parenting coach also, and a very good one. And she's sort of been like my second mom. And she still works there. They were understaffed the other day, and they needed my help. They asked if I could come in for a day because I knew what I was doing, and I came in. And I looked in our med bag, and in the med bag was a copy of my book that was very pleasingly covered in dirt. Very, very dirty. It's a white book, so maybe I didn't think that one through. It's covered in dirt. It's all dog-eared. And she says, actually, it's great because there's a lot of good stuff in here, but also just as a resource, when we're at a loss for what to play, we can flip through the book and see if there's anything that piques our interest that we might not have thought about yet.
Yeah, and I also think, aptly, when you see it dirty, you know that it's being used. Well, and I like the idea that it's available when, you're struggling for an idea. It's there, right? Like we have all of these ideas in our head, but it's like accessing them. So it's very cool. I really do love the name of the book, the Field Game Field Guide, and I think that that's so powerful. I wonder, did you feel like when you were actually young and a teenager, did you feel like you had the ability to use your voice in a way that adults would listen?
I think so. I think I was given that opportunity because, especially in the context where I worked, right, working with children, at that point, being young is almost like being more experienced. I have some knowledge they don't have. I'm closer to the source material. So in some ways, there are challenges, right? You're working with a 14-year-old kid, not going to have all the life experience, the work experience that a full-grown adult does. But on the other hand, I'm going to be able to tell you what the kids are thinking about. Because if we're working with 7-year-old children and I'm 14, it's not a huge age gap, actually. Like, I still am there. I still remember what it's like.
And I think the 7-year-old sees you as somebody that they can be, where when they look at an adult, it's, this authority figure who maybe is having fun sometimes, but they're not going to be that person anytime soon. So it's kind of a neat little opportunity for the younger children to see potentially who they could be someday.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think so.
What's your favorite game if you had to put?
Ooh, man, that's really hard. I think one game I have in there is Banana Slug Tag or Everyone's It Tag. That's a classic game from my youth that I love. Another game that I don't want to give it my favorite game status because it's been so long since I've played it,
Yeah.
but it was super fun when I was 7, is Oscar's Garbage Can. This is a game that's in the book. It requires more resources than most of the other games in there, but it's also a game I've never heard mentioned. I played it once in PE in kindergarten, and it was awesome. And I've never heard anybody explain the rules since, but that game is super fun if you're 7, and I encourage people to check it out because it's peak.
Yeah, I'm in the chapter where you talk about banana slug, tag, and honor. And I love the word that you actually come up with is blunt love. So a little bit different than tough love, but you talk about like being honest and calling people out and being uncomfortable. And I think that games really give us the opportunity to be uncomfortable in a safer way than any other experience in our life. And so I think that that's one of the things that is really valuable. So the lessons that you talk about in the game, the importance of losing, honor, fairness, we talked about rules, victory, honorable victory, and cheater, risk, powerful words. And you're sort of implying that young children can learn these things at a really early age. I think what stood out to me the most was that a lot of this came from your inability or challenge in not being the fastest kid in the group.
Yeah, definitely. Due to some poor footwear choice when I was really little, I had really poor running form. I would heel strike, and so I was super slow. And running is a really important part of like every game.
Every game.
So with the exception of hide and seek, I was really bad. And that just goes to show how important these games are, that you could be really bad and still be playing them all the time. You could be stuck playing games you didn't completely enjoy because you weren't winning, because that's just what you had to do. And I also like to get into the idea of, young children, not only can they learn this stuff, they already know this stuff. They just don't have the words to put to it. They might not know it with the same nuance we know it. But in terms of who's a cheater, who's good at winning, who's bad at losing, who is fun to play with, kids are super good at knowing that. They probably know that better than the adults do.
Yeah, and the stories of the kids that you use beyond your own example is so valuable, because when you're telling the story, I can sort of put myself in the shoes of somebody in that story, right? Because we all played games. We've all been in that moment where maybe I am being the sore loser. Maybe I am feeling like this isn't fair for me, and the impact of those experiences. And I think you're absolutely right that they know these things. They don't have the right language to communicate with adults. But I think, wow, what a profound moment to say. These kids know this stuff.
Yeah. I've been writing this talk. I'll go on a brief tangent here. I'm speaking at a camp in April, and I've been writing this talk about children. And one of the things I run into is, how do you deal with the real nuance of this? Because on the one hand, you got to trust the kids to know what they're doing. What they want to do, play games, run around, get in some trouble, that's what they should be doing for their development. On the other hand, you have to recognize that at no point in human history have children grown up effectively without guidance. There are some animals that hatch from the egg and their parents aren't around and they just rely on instinct. Humans aren't like that. We have to learn from our family and our friends and our community. And so the tricky part for a parent or a caregiver or a teacher is discovering where that line of proximal development starts.
If you're listening to this podcast, you're already part of something bigger. You're part of my advocacy team. Leaders of Today and Peers Not Fears exist to amplify voices at the age when so many of us were having moments that shaped who we became, sometimes in silence, sometimes without support. These conversations are about what happens when voices are heard earlier, when leadership is named, and when young people are reminded that they matter. As we move from building these programs to sharing them more widely, my ask is simple. Help us carry these stories forward. Share an episode, talk about the work, pass it along to someone who works with youth, supports teens, or believes in the power of early leadership. Because when we normalize telling these stories and believing in young voices, we don't just change individual lives, we change what's possible.
You know, where is the fuzzy gradient between total independence and overbearing? And that's going to be different for every kid. And one of the things I think games are so good at is they are a microcosm of the real world. And so within the structure, within the box of the game, the children can be completely independent. They make their own rules, they make their own decisions, they pick their own fights. Within that structure, total independence. And that's sort of, in my experience, the most effective way to teach this independence and get children comfortable with the risks they will have to take to become the heroes in their own story, is not to try and strike a balance between independence and caution. It's to create a structure in which they can be totally independent.
Yes, 100%. And I think games, like you said, is that structure, right? Because the risk can feel really big and really icky, and the reward, like, that's one of the things that I will often talk to kids about is like, why did you take that chance to go across the circle? And they were like, it was fun. And I was like, yes, because the risk was you might have gotten caught, right? And so that risk feels so enormous, and the reward is really, really powerful. And I think, so who are you speaking to in that talk? Will it be the adults?
I think it will be the adults. I don't know exactly who's going to be in the audience. I actually have a very brief section I'm hoping to use where I speak directly to kids because I have some things to say to them. But a big part of my philosophy towards children has to do with risk-taking in every single form. I'm actually a big fan of danger because danger feels to me like heavyweight risk training. You know, there are risks. You could stay up all night studying or playing video games and not studying, and then you could fail a test and maybe get a bad grade, but maybe you don't care.
Yeah.
Maybe you get a bad grade eventually, sort of. The risk is not visceral. But danger, the risk is bodily harm. And it's not that I want children to get hurt.
Right.
But every single thing you do in life that you have to do is going to have some level of risk. And so if you want your kids to be successful in the way that matters to them, they need to be comfortable and confident taking risks. And so I like, you know, rough and tumble play and dangerous activities and just real grit as a training instrument because, you know, you're not going to get strong lifting the light weights over and over again. You got to take some of these risks and get, you know, your knees scuffed a couple of times to figure out what works and what doesn't.
That's so powerful. And yes, I think that is the fear for most parents, right? Danger feels like I can't let my kid be in danger. But you nailed it when you said like that risk of playing video games and failing a test or getting a bad grade, that doesn't have the same impact as the risk in feeling like bodily harm might actually occur. And I think that goes back to like that survival mechanism, right? And I'll talk a lot in my talks about like the zones of comfort, right? You don't learn anything when you're comfortable. You also don't learn anything when you're in your panic zone. But in between those two zones, when you're challenged, that's where all the learning takes place. And I think parents are very fearful of the edge of that challenge zone where panic becomes inevitable, but there is a zone in between.
Yeah, of course. And it's going to be, and the tricky part is it's going to be different for every kid because children are real people.
Yeah.
And just like adults, they have different personalities, different interests. Some kids might simply not want to jump off the bridge. And so that's probably not what they should be doing. Like if you don't want to jump off the bridge, there's no reason to jump off the bridge. There's no benefit to you. But that is what's the tricky part for adults is whereas the risk is visceral, the benefit is amorous. Like if your kid wants to climb a dangerous tree or, you know, wants to jump off a dangerous rock or something, it is very obvious to you as an adult what the risk is. But what is not so obvious is what the benefit is. What on earth are you gaining from doing that? And that's one of the things I'm trying to hammer home. Is there is a really important piece of development that's happening there. And within reason, using your judgment as the protector of the child, you got to let it happen.
Yeah. Well, and it's confidence building. That's exactly what it is, right? So if I take this risk and I'm successful, all of a sudden the growth in my confidence in myself is enormous. And you can placate me with words as much as you want. It's never going to have the same impact as being successful through a risk. And with risk, there's always going to be the chance of failure, the chance of mistakes, the chance of faltering. And that is what makes risk so powerful.
100%.
Yeah. And I think what I love the most is all of the skills that you talk about learning through games are the skills that I talk about as leadership skills. And so often, like confidence and leadership and trust and fair, they don't feel like things that we can practice and build, right? It's like, oh, that kid's a leader. They got chose to be a leader. That's just them, right? And so it's what you're creating is opportunity to build the skills that so often we dismiss as I either have it or I don't.
Right? I mean, you and I are talking about the same thing because those are the skills.
Yeah. So where did this leadership development for you sort of take place?
I think a lot of it was at this program where I was a participant in this program before I worked there. It started, a little bit of background on it. It was founded by a number of martial arts instructors. And I did some martial arts when I was a kid, and then they left this particular school and they were our favorites, and we followed them into this new thing. And that was when I was about 11. And before the program really got going as a business, it was more like a co-op at some point. And we were just spending a lot of time out in the woods, and it was me and my friends and occasionally some new kids. And there was some actual purposeful leadership training. I think one of the founders, she did take it upon herself to do this little mini leadership program for the older kids. And I found myself really benefiting from that. And she talked a lot about how to be an effective leader. You have to first learn how to be an effective follower, which is, the word effective is like super important because you don't want to be a sheep. You don't want to be a blind follower, but you have to be an effective member of a team. You got to be able to do that before you're going to be able to lead.
Yeah, I think that is what's missing so often when we just elevate people into leadership roles, right? We haven't identified that they are good followers. And especially in young ages, right? We sort of elevate good students into leadership roles, and we haven't given them the tools to be effective followers. I think that's incredible development and really powerful. And there is a lot of what I hear is training the trainer, right? So you were a participant, then you got some training, and then you were sort of sharing what you learned with others. And that is the mode in which so many people can learn to do things that they didn't know they could do.
Yeah, I guess the thing about being a good follower is you have to be following something by choice. Like, this is one of the things that I think kids really struggle with sometimes in a school environment, is it's all well and good to say you need to learn to be a good follower, but the kid is going to think, hey, not every kid, but some kids are like, I'm not with the program. I'm not going to learn to follow this. It would be a lie. I don't believe in it. This isn't for me. And you can talk, there's a conversation to be had about whether or not those ideas are misguided, but it is how the children feel. And because they're real people, their feelings matter. Yeah. You want them to learn how to be good followers, you got to give them something worth following.
Well, and I think what we're talking about is very different than team sports. You know, like there are games in team sports, but there's no flexibility in rules. There's no like keeping people in and out and learning those skills. Eventually, we can put them into practice into team sports, but with games, there's a real motivator. There's a real desire to be skilled, and you don't have to be skilled athletically, right? So you don't have to have all the skills that you need in order to play a specific sport when you're playing games. And you're a case in point, right? You might not have made it on the track field, but you could still participate in games. You just had to allow the game to flex in order to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be a skillful participant, but the skill is not mechanical skill. It's emotional skill and social skill. That's what really matters to getting invited back.
And connection, right? Connection and community, and understanding that you can't be the top dog all the time, which is where the effective follower comes in. And I think that there's a lot of value in that. So Wallace, I also really love for my guests to sort of give some advice and share. What advice do you have for general teenagers maybe today?
Okay. Well, I think I'm going to echo sort of some of the stuff I wrote for you earlier. Any decision is better than no decision. And one of the things I think teenagers should know, and this was an important thing for me to realize, is when encouraging parents and friends say something like, you are enough, when you're feeling anxious, they don't mean you're all you're ever going to be. Because that's the worst thing you could possibly be told if you're feeling like, I'm not working towards my goals fast enough, I don't have the life I want yet. The absolute last thing you want to hear is you're as good as you're ever going to get. But that's not true. When people say you are enough, they mean you are worthy of love and life. But they do not mean you don't have some work to do. And the work is going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. But you absolutely can do it. There is a path towards what you want, and it's not going to be through luck. There's going to be some luck involved, but every single person who ever got what they wanted in life was lucky. It's just that there's luck all around us. You got to be able to pounce, and you got to be ready to pounce on these opportunities that luck gives you. So when I say any decision is better than no decision, what I mean is that you're going to make mistakes, and they're not going to be comfortable. There's no way to fail comfortably, but being bold in your life is going to work out for you so much more than being timid. You just have to do things and see what sticks. And eventually you'll look back on some of the decisions you made that seemed nonsensical, and you realize they were the first step on the stepping stones that led you to where you want to be.
Wow. I also wanted to, as you were talking, I had a question about, would you advise the kid who feels like games are beneath him or her? What advice would you give to that person?
Ooh, I would say take a step back from your life and pay attention to how much in common with games does your day-to-day life have. Really pay attention to it, because it's sort of a cheesy line that life is a game. That's because it's not true. Life is a series of smaller games. And if you want to be good at life, you got to be good at playing games. You don't have to love them, right? You don't have to be 16 and just want to play tag all the time. But if you are 16, you better be able to play a fair game of tag. Honorably, you got to be able to play it well, because if you can't, that's going to be reflected in your relationships and your friendships and your relationship to your family, your parents, and your employer. So I would encourage you to give it a second chance. And thankfully, it's not going to be hard. It's actually going to be pretty easy as long as you're willing to do the work.
I think you're speaking to me too, because there are times where, as 40 plus years old, I don't want to play a game. But when I do, the value I get from being part of a game, being part of a community, just having a different type of fun is really, really valuable. So I appreciate that advice very, very much. Wallace, how can people get your book?
Oh, well, it's available on Amazon, but I recommend people go directly to my website, fieldgameguide.com, because it's the same price and I do my own fulfillment, and the copies I have this luxurious linen cover that's very nice, whereas the Amazon copies are going to be a less appealing material. So nice. This is the copy you want. You can get it on fieldgameguide.com. That's the place to go.
I love it. Thank you so much. And are you on any social media? Can my listeners follow you anywhere?
Well, I have some social media accounts. They're sort of dormant at this time.
Okay.
But if anybody has any questions for me, my inbox is always open. And can we put my email in the show notes?
We can, yeah.
My professional email is always open. I'm open to any questions.
So this has been great. Thank you so much for your time. And I can't wait for more people to get a copy of this book and start playing games.
Well, thanks for your time, Lorraine. I can't wait to listen to the episode.
Are you ready to help the young people in your life unlock their inner strength and step confidently into leadership? The new workbook from Peers Not Fears, Your Voice Matters, Uncovering Your Unique Leadership. It's designed to help teens see the leader in themselves, step by step. It's not just a workbook. It's the first step towards a ripple effect that could change lives. Let's turn today's teens into tomorrow's titans. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other parents who might benefit from this conversation. Together, we can support our teens in building healthy, positive relationships and become leaders of tomorrow. Until next time, I'm Lorraine Connell, and this is Leaders of Today, Teens to Titans.